around a little bit. All right, thank you guys for coming out. Appreciate it. It's the first titanium user conference in Europe, and so I'm really, really excited. Why don't we give Boyd Lee a round of applause and everybody that helped bring this together. I think most of you guys know me, but if you don't, here's where you can find me at Twitter or GitHub. I don't get to code as much, although I do like to comment on a lot of the pull requests. So I think the engineers inside the company don't appreciate that as much as I do, and probably you do. But I'm glad to be here, glad to be speaking with you. I'm going to talk about a few things today. And I'm going to try to be short because I know there's many better speakers than I am that are going to come after me and talk a lot about some of the exciting things that's happening in the community. But I thought I'd start off talking to you a little bit about the vision that I have and where we're going as a company and where we think the market is and how we're all on this big journey together. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the accomplishments we've done together as a community in the last year. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done as a product and where we're going over the next year or so as a product, some of the new things that we're working on. And then lastly, I'll wrap it up a little bit and talk about a little bit about kind of the company and how we're seeing the company grow and sort of our ambitions as a company and certainly together as a community. So first what I thought I'd start off is in really these three fundamental shifts that really are spending a lot of energy at our company thinking about these macro shifts that are happening in the market. They're pretty significant. They're all individually, secularly really big. And I'm going to share a few of these shifts with you and certainly welcome everybody's feedback. But these shifts we think are shaping pretty much everything that we do on the planet. Certainly the way we interact with machines, the way technology is really impacting our day-to-day life, and the 7 billion people on the planet that are going to interact with this type of technology. The first is really what we call, what we say is mobile is really disrupting everything. It's a pretty significant, very impactful trend. It's not only making massive opportunity for companies, but it's very significantly disruptive for maybe incumbent companies. Just a few examples. Obviously, most of these screens are probably fairly familiar. Uber is definitely a hot company, at least in the United States and some places in Europe. I was in Singapore the other day. They just launched Uber in Singapore. Massive disruption to the existing way that people think about travel and taxi cabs and things like that. Of course, Instagram, thinking about the way we actually share our memories and our experiences with social networking. Nest is a great company that based in Silicon Valley that's revolutionizing the thermostat in the home and how do you think about mobile and home appliances. And then probably my favorite, because they're an Accelerator customer, is a company called Safeguard, a boring little multi-billion-dollar company in the United States that handles this idea that what happens when your home gets taken over by the bank. Very unfortunate thing in the United States and a lot of places all over the world right now. What happens when the bank unfortunately has to foreclose and that home has to sit empty. In some cases in the United States in the last few years, it's had to sit empty for years. What's happening in something like Safeguard is they have 700,000 homes that need to be inspected every month, 5,000 people that need to go into these homes every day and figure out in the Northeast and they're in the winter, if you don't winterize these homes, they actually, the pipes burst, or if you don't cover the pools ruin, and that becomes a really big problem for the property value. So how do you actually put people into those homes in a massive way? And so they're using mobile in ways they can never do this before. Literally a year and a half ago when they first launched with Titanium, they were still using paper. It took them days to be able to figure out where they needed to go next. And so you've got a massive opportunity where it's totally revolutionizing their business. They're taking on more and more home inspections and growing their business from that, taking advantage of this technology. Of course, we think about mobile right now. We think about the handheld and the tablets more often, but very quickly we're gonna see mobile being around everything. It's going to go beyond certainly the tablet and the handheld. We have this little thing called a Fitbit. I don't know how many people. Anybody have a Fitbit? Lots of people probably have a Fitbit. A handful of people. Pretty popular right now. It's a really cool little device. You wear it, communicates with your smartphone, talks to the cloud, stores pretty much everything that I'm doing as far as my sleep, my walking, my running, my stairs. Pretty much profiles in a scary way a little bit, especially when my wife looks at it and doesn't say you're not working out enough. It basically profiles pretty much my body, my health, and helps me understand where I need to do better. And these devices are going to explode. I think pretty quickly, in a year or two, we'll probably stop talking about mobile as a specific form factor. We'll probably talk about mobile as anything that's a smart phone that talks to the cloud and that really helps us in some sort of way. Of course, very recently we started working with this company, Recon Instruments, makes these devices for Oakley. This is a ski goggle. It's a little bit hard to see because it's black on black, but it's a ski goggle that you wear. It's got an Android heads-up display in the goggle. It's a wearable computer device. I went skiing with it over the holiday seasons in Tahoe in the United States, and it's got basically the ability to build apps that you can put into the display. So quite alarming when you're skiing down the thing and you've got an app, but it's pretty interesting. You can actually, it's got 9 or 10 sensors on it. You can do all kinds of things like humidity and altimeter and speed and velocity and things like that. So quite an interesting opportunity where you can actually build applications for this. So mobile is really changing the game, as we all probably know. And of course, the web, the time we spend on these applications or these smart devices is really changing. It's really shaping. The web's not going to go away. It's still a very important part, as we know. But the time that we're consuming on the web versus the apps, these things that really are capturing our imagination and changing the way we interact with computers, is really changing. And really that comes to really the second big key point we think, and that really mobile requires fundamentally a different approach. We can't just take the old middleware that we have in our environments today, or the old kind of browser that maybe we've been using, and really just make that a mobile thing. It's not just another interface necessarily. It's fundamentally a different thing than what's set on our desktop in the last 5 to 10 years. It's fundamentally a different way of thinking about the relationship we have with these devices. Today most people are buying their own devices. They're bringing them into work, right? They have a very different relationship. They're customizing their devices. They're customizing not only their applications, but the way they actually decorate these devices. It's fundamentally a different way of thinking about the machine and human relationship we have. And so it requires a fundamentally different approach, fundamentally a different software stack, fundamentally a different way of thinking about the cloud, and fundamentally a different way of putting things together. And of course, it brings us to really 3 major, very significant areas of technology that we're all focused on right now. One is mobility. We've talked a lot about mobility. Mobility is going to continue to grow and will define things. Mobility in and of itself is probably one of the most disruptive things since the internet in the last 15 years, 20 years. The second part is social. Social is really redefining the way we work, not only from a networking standpoint and how, our friends and our relationships, but the way we code, the way we share software, the way we collaborate, open source, the way things are actually put together, the things that we're doing here. It's a social movement, right? People come together differently with social. Certainly the networking aspects are important as well, but it's also the way it's impacting our business, the way we code, and where people live. And then third is very significant, and in and of itself is a massive trend. It's cloud. In cloud, we've been using cloud for a while now, and it's meant a lot of things over the ages. I remember, a little more than 10 years ago, we used to call it ASP. But now cloud is not just where we put our physical machines, right? It's much more than that. We can't just say the cloud is an Oracle database living in some machine in some remote area. That's the cloud. No, that's not the cloud. The cloud fundamentally allows us to think differently about business models, SaaS, the way we deploy software, the way we build it, the way we assemble it, the way we think about storage and compute. Is fundamentally way different. So we need to think about these things together, but also independently of each other, because they're all 3 very significant. In our kind of thesis is that all development, sort of the third point, all development really becomes mobile development very quickly. One of our investors is eBay. They have in just the eBay marketplace, which everybody knows as eBay. Of course, eBay now has grown to be a much bigger business. But if you just sort of think about eBay as the marketplace, which is what it started from, they have about 2,000 engineers that work on the marketplace. About 200 of them, 10% now, are working on mobile, and that's for all of eBay. But more than 30% of all their revenue now comes to the mobile device. Not the mobile web, but the mobile apps that run on iPhone and Android. It's pretty significant. They said in 2 years it'll be more like 50 to 60%, and in 4 years it'll be more like 80%. So think about what happens is 80% of your revenue or 80% of the value of the thing that you're creating shifts, like it did in the early days of the internet from client server, What happens to all the labor? What happens to all the priorities? What happens to all the technology shift? It's going to shift as well, right? So we think very quickly we're going to stop saying mobile if it's yet some new category, some new way of defining applications, and we're going to think about mobile really as the way of building applications. Again, it doesn't mean the web's dead, just like the mainframe's not dead. But it means the focus as an industry, the focus for all of us is going to be around mobile as the main primary interface, the main primary development methodology we're thinking about. And mobile's quite different, right? It's much different than the way we've done the desktop and the browser. It was mostly the mouse is the motion device, the input and output device, the display. It was mostly us tethered to a desktop. We weren't really carrying it around. The advent of laptops changed that slightly. But it was still mostly a tethered experience. But with the new paradigm, really, touch certainly being one of the biggest impacts that have been made in the last 4.5, 5 years with the advent of the iPhone initially, that's really changing the way we interact with these machines and changing the way that the user expects to interact with these capabilities that you're building. And increasingly with Siri and voice, with Connect and motion, vision. I mean, it's going to really reshape the way we think about applications that we need to build and what capabilities our users are expecting and what offers that we can make from them. And this is placing a pretty significant burden on all of us, right? Because these advantages are going to be significant. They're going to be taken advantage of definitely by companies like Apple and Google and others. And that expectation, much like what happened in the consumer mobile, is going to shift into us as well. The experiences that we're expected to be able to deliver. We asked, we just did a survey, and we asked back, it just came out in Q1, but we asked it back in late Q4. We sent out an email to kind of enterprise customers, people that had enterprise titles, that had enterprise domains, and we asked them, we had about 700 people reply, and we asked them, this year, how many projects, new projects, not existing projects, but net new projects that you're going to focus on in the enterprise, just commercially, how many of those projects are going to be desktop web, and how many are going to be mobile? And 72% said mobile. Probably not surprising for all of us in this room. But when we shared it with a handful of CIOs, and we talked to them about some of these findings, and we shared it with the press, a number of the CEO friends that we shared these numbers with after we gave them the results said, that's too low, actually. Pretty much virtually every new thing that I'm looking at is mobile. Right, again, feels a lot like 1998, 1999 for us that were around. The shift's happening very, very fast. And just to illustrate that shift, the iPhone, not Apple, just the iPhone, not the iPad, not anything else, the iPhone is bigger in revenue than all of Microsoft. Something that 5 years ago did not even exist, at least to us. Existed in the minds of Steve and certainly over at Apple, but something that 5 years ago did not even physically exist on this planet, at least from a commercial standpoint, is now bigger than all of Microsoft. At the time, the largest software company in the world, still a significant company. And if you think about it from a business standpoint, let's say, what does that mean? Certainly we know what it means as technologists. We've been on this wild tidal wave riding with them. But what does it mean as a business? Most businesses have a 5-year planning cycle, right? If you go into an enterprise, you think about planning, it's 5 years. That's about how long it takes for them to really think about anything, right? Of course, that's changing now because 5 years ago, when they started thinking about what they were going to do as their IT roadmap, these things didn't exist. And so that's a huge, huge, huge threat to the enterprise. Huge threat to all businesses, big and small, and it's certainly a massive opportunity for all of us as well. For the companies that really take advantage of this, it's going to be a massive opportunity. For the companies that don't, it's going to be quite big creative destruction. And just another illustration that it's probably clear in our mind now, but the iPad is outshipping now the PCs. Again, HP is the largest PC vendor in the world. We all know they've got some pretty significant challenges ahead, but now the iPad, just one category, not even a category, one brand within an emerging category. Of course, now we know the iPad is falling behind, and many other Android tablets and others are catching up. But just the iPad alone is already something that, again, 2 years old now? So a significant change is happening. And really the problem we think, and I think about mobility, is enterprises, businesses, anybody that's doing this is really thinking about it as an evolutionary approach, very typical of a company, right? In any kind of new transition that happens in technology. They're thinking about it very evolutionary in the approach of a massive revolution. Things are shifting quite dramatically. I worked at a company in 97, 98 in the United States that was a big railroad company, significant multi-billion-dollar company. And it was the advent of the web, and they were shifting from the mainframe trying to figure out what to do with the web. Right? And we had a lot of the applications in the enterprise were all 3270 green terminals. Anybody remember those things? They were pretty fucking awful. But that's how we did things in the enterprise not too long ago. And the first projects around the web were, let's put the 3270 terminal in a web browser in Netscape, and that's the way we'll deliver these apps. Right? That's the way we'll deliver that experience, that internet experience, because I can navigate to it like a browser, and I keep the same application. It kind of looks a little different, but I keep that in the browser, and that is the web, right? And we're seeing similar things happen in mobility. We're starting to shift away from that, but similar things that happen in mobility. We thought we could just sort of micro-miniaturize content and put it on a small device, and that would become basically a new experience. That would really take advantage of cloud and mobile and social and all these big things. But we can. It's totally fundamentally different. That's why it's such a huge disruption. It's such a huge opportunity for all of us. Anytime you have these massive changes, it presents such a great opportunity. And so our feeling is that really innovation, the good news here, the innovation, things that we all do together, innovation is a journey. It's not a single event, right? It really begins with a single success. And applications are a great way to do that, right? Applications are a way, we're seeing this technology really take hold now, where it's really fundamentally, the first 4 years of mobility, we saw it as really just that port of content into a different type of form factor. And now we're really seeing new business models emerge, new technologies emerge. I mean, Denzo's out there, we're talking about connected car, right? We're thinking about how do we really reshape the way we think about our experience in a vehicle when we get to home. What happens to the content? What happens to the transactions, the relationship? Right? It's a massive, massive opportunity, but it really begins with a single success. So, what we've been thinking a lot about is how do we really help businesses and all the, businesses in a very high level sense, small businesses, big businesses, every business, millions and millions of businesses, some that won't even exist tomorrow and some that don't exist today that will be made possible by this technology, by this massive revolution. How do we really help with continuous mobile innovation? We can no longer, as a technology world, as an IT world, look at 5-year cycles and massive thinking, right? We have to think about agile. We have to think about continuous innovation, continuous delivery. We have to think about things that change quite rapidly. The next 4 or 5 years in mobile are going to be quite dramatic as far as the impacts that we're going to see. I mean, just this year, we're probably going to, next week at Mobile World Congress, we're going to hear about Intel releasing Tizen with Samsung, a new operating system. Firefox OS is going to be out, right? And Telefonica and some people in Europe are going to be adopting that OS and seeing how that goes. Ubuntu just is going to be announcing their OS. Of course, Android and iPhone are huge. Microsoft is certainly not going to be left at the altar here. They're going to put billions of dollars into mobility. And of course, we still have Blackberry and RIM and seeing what happens there, right? Pretty revolutionary operating system, but we'll see what happens in the market and the acceptance. People like you will probably determine if that's successful. The people that build applications, that spend their time, the companies that actually really adopt those applications because the apps are being built by developers and their users are using them and bringing them into the enterprise and using them at home. So we think about how do we make this work. As an enterprise, it's really fundamentally 3 areas that we care a lot about. We're very, very deeply passionate about. Of course, the developers, the community, we think that's, we've spent many, many years really building the community and cultivating that. We think that's extremely important, will always be important, very core pillar of our strategy. Partners, the people that actually help us, the people like Red Hat and OpenShift that help us really bring great technologies, and Denzo and others that bring these technologies and bring these solutions to market with us and with you. And then, of course, the companies that we all work for, either in our own businesses or the businesses that we strive to help. These three are really the cornerstone of our vision and what we think is the success of our company long term. So let me just share a few things of what we've done together. Let's talk about developers, the community. We launched Titanium in 2009 here at WWDC. We knew we were onto something. We were probably, when we launched this, I think we were 6 or 8 people in the company. We had been working about a year on a desktop product, and through that shifted to mobility. Always had planned to go to mobility, but shifted much quicker after working with a customer on a mobile project and having a real tough time trying to make that work. And so we launched in about 6 months. We kind of shifted everything in Titanium and started working on this mobile product. Launched it, not really sure how it would take off, but we launched it in June of 2009, and we had 2,000 downloads the day after. We were really excited. We thought this was magnificent. The community at that time was probably less than 2,000 people around the community. Is anybody in the room around it at that time? No. There's probably a couple people, yeah. And it was really super exciting. Of course, we were confused. We didn't know. I mean, at the time, the desktop was still a very interesting opportunity. The market was still very early. Most people were saying, including our own investors, oh, that iPhone thing, that's a trend. Nobody's going to buy that. At Blackberry, Nokia, they ship more phones in 1 month than Apple will ship this year. But we felt like, man, there's something here. Why? Because we worked with you and lots of developers outside this room to really understand there's a huge opportunity here, and it's quite interesting. Of course, we had a lot of problems along the way. If anybody that was around during those early days, the 0.4 and 0.6 releases went from being a phone gap-like solution, which didn't work very well, to being really what became Accelerator today, and has evolved, and you can sort of see what happened as we took off there. So it's been an amazing ride, and developers really have done just an amazing thing with the technology beyond our wildest dreams. So it's been great. The community itself, and this is forgivingly, I'm sorry, this is the map of the world, and you cannot see it at all. That's pretty awesome. Promise you, there's a bunch of stuff out there somewhere. There's land somewhere in that ocean. Today we have about 25 regular monthly meetups that meet. Over 3,000 people as part of the meetup group. Of course, we have a much larger group of people that meet informally or informally or not through the meetup system, but that's just amazing. So we have, literally all over the world. Literally all over the world. So really exciting times. I mean, when there was unrest in Egypt, it was really exciting to see some of the apps that were coming out of there. It's exciting to see some of the stuff that comes out of Pakistan and Africa and New Delhi. I mean, certainly beyond the modern world, and it's really great to see how mobile is really impacting generations of people that today didn't really have access, and how we're helping enable that, all of us together. And last year, 30,000 new apps were put in the App Store. I mean, you guys were really busy, built a lot of apps. Of course, it's amazing the types of things that we're seeing and the innovations that are happening, and it's really super exciting what you guys are doing and what we're enabling. I did this presentation, or a slight version of this presentation, last week in Tokyo, and Greg reminded me last night, this was like 4 days ago or 5 days ago, that 5 million devices have been added since we did this in Tokyo. So it's 110 million last week, it's 5 million more this week. So it's just an amazing feat if you think about 10% of the smartphones in the world are using at least one Titanium-powered app. And that's an amazing, amazing accomplishment. As a community of what you guys have done and power and the growth of the market of what you're building. It's really super exciting. So now let me transition and talk a little bit about the product, kind of what do we do and where are we going. I know that's always of interest to something that's evolving so fast, and it's not always clear where things are going. So let me talk a little bit about what we did in 3.0. Hopefully everybody now is using 3.0 and very well familiar with it. Came out in December. It's the third major release of Titanium. We're trying to do a major release roughly every 12 to 16 months, hopefully, or 18 months, hopefully on the closer to 12 side. but sometimes it takes a little bit longer depending on the capability. So this is the third major release in 3 years. Lots of bug fixes, many bug fixes reported by the community, lots and lots of pull requests. I think we had several hundred pull requests that came in from the community as part of this release, so thank you very much for that. Great new features. Alloy went beta or preview release in this official release. I'll talk about it. It just went GA if you haven't seen. On-device application debugging, great feature. It took us a little bit too long to get that in place, but certainly we finally got it in place. Lots of accessibility features, very important, especially for the world, which you have to really support. Very important to support people that maybe are hearing or are visually impaired. Making it easy to really install updates and really notify you when there's problems or updates, rather, with modules, and then support for iOS 6 and Mountain Lion and the latest 4.1 release. The other thing that we released that we're really excited about is the CLI. As most of the people who have been around for a while know, that we have terribly hacked together Python scripts that I personally wrote, and I'm ashamed of several years ago. But they worked. They worked for many people for a long time, but they were terrible to really extend. And we kept seeing so many people trying to hack on the Python scripts or trying to create things around that build system or trying to build their own build systems that weren't really, it's complicated to build Titanium compile, and that weren't really well supported. So we took on an endeavor literally last summer to rewrite completely in Node.js, rewrite the command line tools, and we have endeavored since then to really make all command line tools a first-class citizen. That is going to be the most important thing. You'll see a lot more of this, but everything in Titanium we're trying to drive to be driven first class from the command line. That doesn't mean we won't have Studio. I mean, Studio will continue to be important, but Studio uses the command line, so you're guaranteed if you use it in Studio or if you use it on the command line, it's always going to work. So completely new command line base. It's extensible, like everything in Titanium. That's really one of the core principles from an engineering standpoint. It's extensible through these plugins. If you want to, there's good documentation around it, but if you want to look at some examples, Alloy is a plugin of the compiler. So all Alloy does is it's a plugin. When the Titanium compiler runs, it defers to Alloy to compile its piece in the life cycle, and then it continues. So it's really super easy to extend this and build your own capabilities around the plugin. And of course, it's open source. So we invite pull request, localization, everything. So there's a huge opportunity there. We just released last week, I believe it was last week, maybe it was this week actually, early this week, I don't know where I'm at. We released 3.02 Service Pack, about 100 bug fixes that we thought were critical, high priority. Good things around the new iOS 5 graphic layout and the localized splash screens and a new widget called the Search View widget, which is important for Android. Where we're going with 3.1, which hopefully will come out in sometime in May-ish timeframe, is about, again, about 400 bug fixes. One of the things that was missing, and sorry, I forgot to mention, let me mention here because I forgot to mention, Alloy went GA with 3.02, so we're really excited about that. We had over 1,000 developers give feedback, pull requests, and we're really excited about Alloy. It's been a good thing. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about Alloy, but it went GA with that officially. One of the things that's coming in 3.1 is Alloy Content Assist and debugging. You'll actually, today, if you're using Alloy, you'll know it's a little bit of a pain to debug because it generates code, and then when you debug, you're debugging generated code. So it's JavaScript, and it's Titanium code, so it won't be too unfamiliar, but it's written by the machine, and so it might be a little bit hard to follow. And so this has actually already started landing in Master and in Studio. So if you want to actually start playing with it, you can get the preview stream and start playing with it. But Alloy Content Assist, so when you're in Studio, you actually get the proper tags and attributes and all those things, as well as you can actually debug in Alloy, and it'll actually debug through Alloy versus through Titanium. So that's a really exciting thing. We've been working on something for about a year we call Application Code Analyzer. This is in a project, an open source project called Titanium Code Processor, if you've seen that floating around. That is basically an open source project. We have been working for almost a year, a little bit less than a year, on rewriting the foundation of our compiler architecture. And this is basically, one of our engineers has written a brilliant full-blown JavaScript ESX spec compiler, basically, that allows us to do static and dynamic compilation and some really, really super interesting things. But part of it, one of the benefits coming out of it as we're starting to roll this into the base infrastructure, is that it actually allows us to analyze code, not only statically at compile time, but at runtime. And what that allows us to do is do things that are very, very frustrating, I'm sure, to a lot of us titanium developers, which is sometimes I might use an API that's not available, we'll say, in another operating system. I'm sure nobody in this room's had that problem. But we have seen a few developers have that problem where maybe they had some code that they thought this API would work, or maybe it should have worked and didn't work, or maybe it was going through a code path on, let's say, Android for something that was only on iOS. This will actually tell you at compile time these types of things. That's the one thing. So the hope here is that it'll start to actually make it much, much better to tell you ahead of time the problems that you're having or the things that won't work, as well as be able to tell you dependencies and things like that. The second thing that we're hoping that it'll do is really start to tell you where you can optimize your code. So we started putting this in there. A lot of that knowledge today is embodied in our brains. We know that you should do certain things in titanium, right, to be optimized, or certain things should be not done in titanium. You should use a class name on a table view row, for example, right? If you're going to reuse the same layout, that's a speed and optimization. We know that collectively in our heads, but the machine doesn't know that. So what we're doing is we're teaching the machine through the code compiler to be able to learn these. If anybody's familiar with find bugs in the Java world, where you have a big database of best practices, bad things you do, things like that, it's a very similar concept that we're building here. And so we're really excited about that. We're working on some live editing support, which is going to be very familiar to TiShadow, and we've been talking with David and trying to figure out how do we bring this in. Obviously, TiShadow is still very important, but we're trying to bring some of that capability directly into titanium, where the turn times of developing an app is really slow. It's very painful. We want to make that faster. We've got a new list view API spec that's up on the wiki if you want to check it out. It's basically a new type of table view, but it's designed for speed, and it's really designed for a different way of laying out tables. Table views aren't going to go away. They're still very important. They have a different, this is more of a data model driven versus the table view today is more of a view driven sort of API. So the goal here is to really, really have massive performance. Better build and runtime. One of the things that we're working on right now is if you've ever actually compiled and hacked on titanium code, right now it's all based on scans, it's Python. You can see we're kind of trying to get rid of a lot of the old stuff, which has caused a lot of problems over the years. We're rebuilding right now the entire build infrastructure. It's all going to be Node.js based. We feel pretty strongly about eating our dog food there, so it's all going to be Node.js based, and it'll be a much better system. And one of the things that we're trying to do, not sure we're going to be able to make it all perfectly work for 3.1, but we're trying to actually modularize the actual runtimes, basically. So it'll be much faster to be able to release the individual runtimes, the individual OS runtimes, independent of a large titanium release. So we think that'll help us move things like new releases like Windows 8 along faster than things that are maybe a little bit more stable and that need to move slower, like iOS. So today it's fairly monolithic. We have to release everything together and test it all together, and the hope is that this will really allow us to break out the repos, break out the builds, build dependency better, and make it easier. If you just wanted to build one runtime, you could. And that's the new build system. So as you'll see, a lot of our focus is really in two areas. It's a big thing. One is, they're both productivity or performance related. One is the developer performance, your performance. Hopefully the things that we're investing in are to help you build better apps faster, cheaper. Right? Alloy is about how do we really cut down on the time that it takes to build these applications, share code, get better usability, things like that, and generally make it faster for you to build applications with high quality. So things like the CLI and the code analyzer and Alloy and all those things, live editing, all those are around how do we make you more productive using titanium. The second really is about performance. Performance is always constantly is a big deal. We've got some new capabilities that are coming out in 3.1 that are going to make it significantly faster across the bridge and significantly faster as far as the compile and runtime experience for the application. So there's a massive work underway in engineering that's been going on around Android performance and building a new, a full-blown performance suite that we can track on a continuous build basis, all the performance of all the major pieces of our system, and we can make dramatic improvements on that. So as you see, hopefully, two big areas, your performance and certainly the app and the runtime performance. Of course, some other exciting stuff. Open source, as you guys know, it's very dear to our heart, very, very important to us as a company and to our long-term strategy. We just open sourced a little over the 30-something modules that have been traditionally commercial proprietary modules. They're kind of split between two repos. We're in the middle of trying to transition some repos around a little bit. But all the what have been traditionally premium modules are now available in open source. You can build them yourselves. They're under Apache license like normal. And we'll continue to try to push as more of those as we can into open source. And of course, there's many, many open source projects. Some probably you know, and some you probably don't know about or maybe aren't aware of. Like Alloy, of course, is a major open source project. It's got a lot of excitement around it. StreamReduce was the really cool technology that we acquired through Notable. StreamReduce, if you're familiar with Hadoop. Does anybody do Hadoop in here? Any Hadoop people? All JavaScript people, one Hadoop person. All right. Come on, big data's the thing, right? You guys are all supposed to be doing big data these days. So Hadoop, the concept, and certainly beyond Hadoop, but the concept is MapReduce, massive batches of data that you can process efficiently in parallel. What Notable Technology did is they built this technology called StreamReduce. The problem with MapReduce, you have to take massive lots of data and you have to constantly run it in batch. So it has latency inherent in it, but it's great for massive data sets. What StreamReduce has done, and we open source this technology, what StreamReduce does for what MapReduce does, but for streams of technology. Because if you're streaming data and you have something happening in real time, you can't wait till tonight to run a big Hadoop job, right? You need to actually process today, and you potentially actually need to run computations on it, like standard deviation or things like that to figure out what's happening. So StreamReduce is a technology we open source as part of buying Notable, and we hope to continue to build that out. So check that out. It's a pretty cool technology. A little bit different than your standard Titanium fare. CLI, code process, we talked about Aptana. Charities, an open source project that we have recently open sourced, and we'd love for participation in that. For anybody that came to CoStrong or participated or saw the Hack to Help events we did there, the goal there was we've been doing a lot of these charity events. We've been working with a lot of different charities over the years, and we wanted to make it much easier to actually build these types of applications, really focused on the charities and really focused on their use cases. So we built an Alloy-based framework called Charity. It's open source. We've been working with probably 10 charities right now for their adoption of this platform and make it easier for them to manage their applications, as well as we've had one company that focuses clearly on Titanium and charities called Roar, one of our partners, has now switched their entire platform over to Charity, and they're also helping us maintain it. So that's just a number of a few projects. Open source obviously is very, very important to us. We're going to do everything we can where it makes sense to try to open source more and more. I mean, one of the things as a philosophy inside the company is that if we can, we want to open source it. And sometimes we can't for lots of reasons. For sometimes there's reasons where we would love to open source it because we're working with a partner. We're not able to make access to their things, so we can't open source it, so we have to do it later. Right? That was the case with Blackberry for a while. Right? There was licensing restrictions and reasons, trademarks, and other things that we just weren't able to make it open source. Right? At some point, we obviously have now merged it, and you'll see more and more of that. But where we can, we try to make as much open source as we can, and that's very important to us. Just to talk a little bit about what's coming from a roadmap standpoint from Titanium. Support for Blackberry, I saw Liz over there. A lot of people doing Blackberry, especially in Europe still. All my friends in the United States say, why in the hell are you doing Blackberry? Does anybody use a Blackberry on the planet? And I keep trying to convince them, yes, there's quite a number of people. America's a pretty small place, right? So we're really excited about some of the stuff that's happening with Blackberry. I mean, again, it's going to really be about developers and the adoption ultimately that will tell us if Blackberry will survive as a platform. But as a platform, it's really a beautiful platform. They've done amazing stuff with it. There's a lot to be hopeful for Blackberry. We'll announce in the next few days with Intel Tizen support, preliminary. It'll be out. It's starting to merge. If you watch the GitHub repo and things like Kitchen Sink, you'll start seeing some of the merge and pull requests coming in. Tizen's a new operating system that has been developed by Samsung and Intel. It was the bastardization, and that's the non-marketing word. It was basically Bada, Meebo, Migo, a whole bunch of things all put together and called Tizen. It was the funniest thing a few months ago. We were talking about this internally, and one of our developers said, I just don't understand why we're building an operating system. And I said, what in the hell are you talking about? Accelerator is not building an operating system. That's crazy. And he said, well, we keep talking about this Tizen thing. And he thought Ti meant titanium and Zen meant, the best operating system in the world. So to him, he thought Tizen was our own operating system, and we were trying to be cute and call it Tizen, like the titanium, the best of all operating systems. And I said, no, unfortunately, you haven't been listening very well. But and then to our Microsoft friends, this probably can't come soon enough to a lot of people, but it is in progress. It's a little bit slower than we'd like for a number of reasons, but we hope to have Windows Phone and tablet support, which we demoed at CoStrong and announced with Microsoft back in October. We hope to have that here in the next couple quarters. So I thought I'd just point out a couple notable communities. There's so many community projects, impossible to even talk about them or give them justice. But I thought I would just talk about three that are really exciting to me and to many people in the community. Ti Package Manager, TPM. If you're familiar with a guy named Euphoric on Twitter or GitHub, this guy named Christian Sullivan. He's now an Accelerator engineer. We're really excited to have Chris. He's been working with us for about 4 or 5 months now. He wrote Ti Package Manager. We're trying to find ways that possibly we could bring this into the Titanium command line or make it easier. Basically, it's a packaging manager. It's like NPM and Node. It allows you to package modules, distribute them, things like that. Ti Shadow's David Bankier's project, really, really awesome. If you haven't used it, check it out. It's kind of modeled initially after Adobe Shadow, which is the ability to kind of run an app on multiple devices. And it's really changing the way you actually build Titanium apps. And so really excited to give these guys props. And Foundry 22 is another, it's not open source, but it is a free app out there that is a cloud build, basically. So you can actually submit, if you have teams of people working on an app together, you want to have one set of distribution keys, you can actually submit the apps, and it does a cloud build on various different, it's kind of modeled a little bit to some degree after PhoneGap build, if you're familiar with that. So these guys have built that. We're always looking at different ways we can, what's the appropriate thing to bring into the core, or what's the appropriate thing to leave in the community, right? We can't do everything. We don't want to do everything. And in fact, everything should not be in core. We're trying to make sure we're being very deliberate about that. But there's always these great opportunities in the community to actually do wonderful things on top of Titanium. And a lot of you are participating in those, so thank you. Alloy, I think, has anybody not heard about Alloy? It's okay, you can raise your hand. We won't make fun of you. All right, there's a few liars in the building, I think. Alloy is something that Nolan and I actually have tried to start 3 times in the last 2 years with many debates among ourselves and among internally and eventually in the community. And there became a breaking point to me about 14 months ago, and we had some incident inside the company in support where there was yet another framework out there that we were trying to figure out how to debug an application that was written in this other framework so that we could fix the problem or at least understand the problem in Titanium. And it was just killing us. It was killing support because they were having to constantly learn these different frameworks. And trust me, those frameworks are all great and awesome. But for us, it was really difficult. I'm sure for some of you that were trying to use some of these frameworks, it was hard. Some of them weren't maintained, some of them were, and it was really difficult. And Nolan and I kept arguing that there's got to be a better way. We need to create an MVC framework on Titanium. One of the best things about Titanium and one of the worst things about Titanium API is the fact that it had no MVC, right? So to a lot of people, that was the best thing in the world because it was a straight API. They could do whatever the hell they wanted. It was a blank sheet of paper when they launched Studio. They could build whatever they wanted in any kind of structure they wanted. They could put stuff anywhere they wanted. They had no foundation. They had to be forced to, like a Rails. So it felt a little bit like PHP without a framework like Zen, right? Or maybe Ruby without Rails. So that was great for some people, and other people it was the worst thing in the world. It was like, I don't know where to put my files, I don't know how to create the patterns that I need to create, I don't know how to do caching, I don't know how to do these things. Thus, there were, we counted at one point, I think there were over 50 frameworks built around Titanium out there that were being used in various states. So we argued because there was a lot of debate internally. We don't want to dictate a framework to our developers necessarily. And philosophically, we had a lot of different opinions about what we should do. We thought it was great on one hand that there were tons of frameworks. That shows a vibrant community finding different ways of solving things. But the other hand, we were experiencing some really real-world problems, which was how to support the community, how to really make it a better product. And clearly there was a big gap that was being filled. So we tried a few attempts. We spent about 3 months prototyping several, looking at the market, looking at all the different, talking to a bunch of developers of the frameworks. What were they trying to solve? What problems did they have that they were focused on? What worked? What didn't work? What would they like for us to do? Not do things like that. And then we prototyped. We prototyped our first version over about a 3-month period. Lots of different versions of the prototype, but got it kind of working. And frankly, it sucked. I took a look at it. Nolan liked it. We won't make fun of Nolan, but he liked it. I thought it sucked. It was fine. It was an actual good attempt, but we didn't think it was very good. So over a weekend, I went home. I pretty much took what I thought was the right way of thinking about Alloy and what I thought would be kind of the right thing to do. And over a weekend, I hacked together a prototype, which became Alloy. And then Tony Lucas-Savage, who most probably know if you've been working with Alloy as the lead architect, really took that project on with a couple other people inside the company and really was the lead and really drove that. And what the best thing about Alloy was we pretty much put it out there in the very, very beginning. I mean, it's kind of been our philosophy where we can, right? Let's get it out there early, let's get it out there often, and let's try to get feedback, because that's the best way you build product, at least in my mind, right? And it went out there very early, and I know that caused some pain for some people, because when you do early, you get roughness, right? You have to actually suffer through a little bit of that earliness, but out of it becomes a better product. So I'm really proud of the work that Tony and the team and you as a community have given great feedback on Alloy. Lots and lots of patches, lots of different adapters, like Aaron Saunders has been writing a sync adapter for ACS. It's just been an amazing amount of contribution on this project. And it shows really how you can build a great, successful community project from the beginning. So we're really super excited about Alloy. We've got a very long and very exciting roadmap for it. We think it's going to really provide a huge amount of opportunity for us. It's obviously one of the philosophies that we'll have. It's an open architecture, right? If you don't want to use Alloy, you don't have to. We're not going to force Alloy on you. It's an optional thing. That's a very important philosophical. If you don't want to use our cloud, there's some great clouds out there like StackMob and Parse. We think ours is going to be better long term. We hope you'll use ours, but certainly we're not going to force anything on it. That's really a philosophical, architectural decision we've always made as a company. So Alloy is one of those. Lots of people like to use other things. Great. But Alloy's something we've made a first-class citizen now, and that's going to be really, really important. Similarly, cloud services, we bought a company called CocoaFish, and I'll tell this story just quickly because I think it illustrates, again, the power of the community. We kept hearing from customers and partners and people in the community that they were spending so much time trying to build the back end and often waiting on the back end before they could get the app. The app was done with Titanium. Hey, it was so fast to build the app. I'm waiting on this back end. I'm either waiting on somebody to give me an API, or I'm waiting on it to get built, or trying to figure out how to deploy it and go to production, all that stuff. We kept hearing that over and over and over again. And Nolan and I had this idea, gosh, in 2006, 2007, we first started the company, that eventually a lot of these services would be cloud services. They'd be consumable in the cloud. And they would be consumed via these smart endpoints. And so we started thinking about, gee, we should really probably try to provide this as an interesting opportunity. We always knew that we'd move in the cloud, and that was going to be a very important part of our long-term product strategy. But we weren't sure if it was the right timing for what we wanted to ultimately do. But we asked the community, You probably don't remember the thing, but you'll sometimes see this happen. I Twittered, to a few people what were they using to connect if they were using these serverless backends, and we received Parse and Kinvey and CocoaFish and all these different companies that were at the time pretty small projects or companies. And we went out and we talked to pretty much most of them, and Aaron Saunders was the one who introduced us to CocoaFish. And within a day, CocoaFish guys were in our office because they were based in San Francisco. We're based in Mountain View, which is just down the road. And we had a deal put together for them to really enlarge in what we thought was a really awesome opportunity. And so we're really trying to grow this opportunity. It's still very, very early, and the team has done a fantastic job of trying to get their platform onto our platform and really grow the robust support around it, as well as add some capabilities around it. So we really continue to focus on this. In January, if you haven't already seen, we made, after many, many discussions we had with lots of you and lots of the Titans, we had lots of great feedback on how do we really make this easy for the developer, people that want to actually use and consume these services, especially early on when they're trying to build a business or trying to build an app for somebody that doesn't have a lot of money. So in January, we announced up to 5 million free API calls per month per app. We think this is unbelievable in the industry. We looked at pretty much everybody else in the industry, and we tried to come up with something that we thought would be, after looking at the data of real apps, how many APIs are being consumed, looking at the competitive market, and we think this is just, massive. Because if you're doing 5 million API calls a month, you've got a fairly successful app. I can tell you that from the data. And then the second part of this, second part of the cloud is really our Node.js product. And it's really this whole idea that CocoaFish is great because it provides you with pre-built services. And we'll continue to grow those pre-built services. But it provides you with some really nice mobile-optimized pre-built services. You can use them with Titanium, without Titanium. You can use them with web or with mobile. It doesn't really matter, right? REST-enabled services built into Titanium or third-party SDKs. But quickly, you start to think about, well, I need to build my own services. If I'm moving to a true SOA architecture, which a lot of companies have done SOA, but it's been mostly behind the server, if I want to really build smart endpoints that consume APIs, RESTful APIs in the cloud, I need to build my own services. So we embarked on an effort a while back to take the CocoaFish stack and add kind of the Node.js PaaS capability to it, so you could build custom services as well as leverage the services out of CocoaFish and work them together. And this is also the foundation that we're starting to work with third parties like Microsoft and Oracle and SAP and others to be able to connect enterprise capabilities into that as well. So you want to be able to consume those enterprise services alongside your custom and pre-built services. The idea is ultimately you can leverage the same language JavaScript on both the client and the server. As more and more time and friction is being removed from the dev operations process, we think this is a huge opportunity. And really that brings me back to ultimately some phenomenal stuff that the community's done, some phenomenal stuff that we've been really focused on and enabling the community through the product and product lines that we're building, but also how does the enterprise, how do we make money? Right? That's the elephant in the room. Constantly we're hearing feedback. How do we make money? How do we differentiate? So one of our core values at Accelerator, we've got 4 core values as a company. One of them, the 4th one, is be humble. It's a very important thing for us. We don't have it all right. We originally, when we first did our core values, Nolan and I, we wrote, don't be a dick, but then we figured out that wasn't going to be very corporate responsibility, and if we ever went public, we probably couldn't put that on the IPO. And it wasn't very PC. So we really came up with Be Humble, which really was an embodiment of what we said. We don't want to work with jerks. We try to be great people. We're passionate about what we're doing. We're excited about the future and the opportunities of working with people like yourself. But we're going to make mistakes. And we're not always going to have it right. And as any growing, open, transparent community, we're going to be finding our way sometimes, right? As all of us human beings always do. So what we've really been focused on is how do we clear some of this up? Obviously, it's very important that Accelerator as a business makes money, right? I was talking to a developer recently in our community, and he was complaining about something we weren't doing good enough, fair enough, and he was talking about how he had built his whole business around Titanium and Accelerator, how important it was, and
how he was investing just a ton of time and energy around Accelerator. And this is awesome. This is great. And that I wasn't doing enough. And I shared with him, and I'll share this with you today so you have some perspective. And Accelerator's invested $50 million. We invested $32 million in 2012 in titanium in the bigger community. It's a lot of money. And he was blown away. He was like, holy crap, I had no idea you guys are spending that much money. And so my point here is that we are very, very excited about building a great company. But to build a great company, you got to do more than just provide great free software. Everybody loves free software, right? We have to also build something that's sustainable for all of us to continue enjoying the things that we're doing with Accelerator. We think this is a very important part of our strategy, that the community, the partners, the enterprises that we work with are a very important part. So some of the things that we've been asked recently, and not even recently, for 2 years now, and certainly where we've screwed up and we've fumbled here and there, and we've tried to figure out the right way of monetizing. We've experimented some different ways. But what we've constantly gotten feedback, and as we signal in and learn a lot about where our position is in the market and what our opportunity is, one of the things that keeps coming up and that is a reasonable request is make it clear to me, community, individuals, enterprises, et cetera, what is free and what is open source and what is commercial. What do I have to pay for? When do I have to pay for it? So that's the thing that we've been really working on for a while. One of the things that we're going to launch pretty soon, and we're trying to figure out exactly when and how, and so this is much transparent as like any open source project. This is sort of like Alloy 0.1 release, right? It's probably going to change. We hope that you'll understand that we're trying to do our best to make it clear. There's always hard trade-offs. There's not a perfect scenario in any way. But what we're going to do, and we're going to start to launch, is titanium. This is the titanium ribbon, and most of you guys are familiar with titanium. The brand titanium will continue to remain open source. That'll be our signal to the market that brand is open source or free. And I say or free because some things like the cloud that run in our cloud won't be open source, but they'll be free. They'll be clearly free and developer optimized. So that brand, and what we're going to do is we're going to rebrand a few things, but titanium, which includes a lot of things today, the studio, the CLI, the SDK, the API, things like Alloy, et cetera, those things are going to be free and or open source. What today is called the ACS cloud, the free version of the cloud, will become Titanium Cloud. So again, it's very clear that that is a free and always will be a free, up to those limits, free offering. And then we're going to change the branding, or I shouldn't say change, but we're going to kind of start using the Accelerator brand to mean the enterprise product or the commercial product. It'll contain new things. It will be powered by titanium, so you'll be able to seamlessly move from one to the other. That won't be a problem. So if you're working with a customer and you're using titanium, but they eventually want to also use the Accelerator things of product, you'll be able to seamlessly move between them. That won't be a problem. But it'll be clear. It'll be a clear signal to you and clear signal to the market what costs money and what is free, and will always remain free. So here's kind of our vision for the product we've been building for about a year now. That not all the arrows are showing up, but you, I think, conceptually get it. That big red thing is supposed to have clouds, but you can't see them. So the Accelerator platform, we're going to start using Accelerator as the moniker for our platform. That includes a lot more than just Studio. Studio or Titanium will be over here. That'll be really focused on the developer, clearly. We've recently made some announcements with SOSTA and some others, like around testing, and our application cloud is really the commercialization of the CocoaFish or the ACS cloud, performance, analytics, a bunch of other things. Really hoping that this starts to clear it up. But also, this product is really a result of really spending. We now have about 1,400 enterprise customers, and this is really the result of listening to a lot of you, a lot of partners, a lot of our customers saying the types of things that they want to see from us beyond just Titanium, the build, which is always going to continue to be very important, but what are the other things that enterprises need? As applications go from being just a consumer-oriented thing or some sort of .com-ish thing that I need because everybody else has one, to being a very critical part of my business. If you go back to Safeguard, 5,000 people use that application every day. It runs their business. If it goes down, it's a problem. It's millions of dollars of revenue potentially at risk. And so what are the things that we can do as a business and as a product to really help them in those types of scenarios? That's what we're focusing on as a company. Instead of, continuing, obviously, the key of all of this is really, can we build a phenomenal titanium, a phenomenal cloud, a phenomenal community around that? And that's one of the most exciting things we hear from companies every day is, man, you guys have just a phenomenal community. If I want to hire people, contract people, go to partners, whatever, I've got a lot that I can get from that. And that continues and always will be important. So let me wrap with saying thank you. You guys have done just an amazing thing. You've enabled us to build a phenomenal company. I know a lot of people are here because they're building their entire businesses, whether it's a small business or a big business, around us, around the technology, around the community. We realize that we're only one part of a larger piece to make this successful, and it takes all of us working together to be successful. So you've got a great day lined up, actually a couple of good days, and I'm really, really super excited to be here and meet a lot of people if I haven't met you before. I'll be around till tomorrow, and with that, thank you very much.
We have about 5 minutes for a couple of questions. If you want to take a few questions. Has anyone got any questions for Jeff?
No hard ones, though. I'll ask Boyd Lee all the hard
ones.
Hands
up. Yeah, you do.
Thank you. Well, first of all, Jeff, thank you very much for being here today, supporting the tiConf, something that we really appreciate. Every time I have to talk about titanium, mostly for newbies, I heard the same complaint. Titanium doesn't have a GUI builder. This is something that
GUI builder, yeah.
Yeah, maybe developers doesn't care so much, but it's there. I mean, the market is asking for it. So my question is going to be someday in the roadmap, or do we have to wait to a third-party solution?
So it's a hard question. Again, we have a lot of debates, probably as a lot of you guys do in your own companies and your own communities. It's a really hard one. GUI builders are probably one of the biggest questions we get often. But as we wrestle with it, it's also the hardest thing to do right as technologists, right? They demo really very well, right? They're awesome. You can drag and drop a few things here. You can put it on. I mean, we've evaluated, of course, all the traditional tools out there. We've looked at things like Cinch has done their architect product. I mean, it's a pretty beautifully built thing if you think about it. But you try to go build a real app that any of us would build in titanium, it's just not possible. I mean, outside of some really, really, really trivial apps, maybe just a pure Visual Basic oriented app, just very, very simple. Hook up an RSS feed and display it in a table view, which most people aren't really doing beyond demos. It really becomes really hard, we think. With Alloy, that was our first step, though. We felt like if we could figure out Alloy, if we could create something where we have a declarative UI, we could make that more toolable. And if we could really separate cleanly the sort of the application logic away from the UI logic, which of course is hard in titanium because it's all mixed together, we felt that would be at least the first stepping stone to getting closer to a GUI tool. One of the big key things that we did in Alloy, obviously, is reusable widgets. This sort of idea, can you build reusable UI and sort of business logic, application logic, package, much like a module, but around Alloy. Again, that was our first step. We felt like that was a good step of getting some reusability and some leverage. So that's one end of the spectrum. It's been really hard. We've seen a number of tools been built around titanium that do this. We've had customers play around with those and use those tools. And it's a really, really difficult thing to get right. So we don't want to do something that's not going to be right, that's not going to work for you guys, right? That's the most frustrating thing, is you build something and it kind of half works and it kind of works 50% of the time, or for 50% of the use cases. We want to build something that's going to work for 80% of the use cases. The second thing is that we find is that, and although this is coming together greatly today, and things like titanium, I think, bring this together, the designer and the developer typically, although they work more and closer together and sometimes they're converging a little bit, often they're different tools that the designer's going to use and wants to use and will always use, like Photoshop, right? So we don't want to compete against something like Photoshop, something that all the designers love. It's a perfect tool for their job, and it's got a long history, right? So one of the things that we've been playing around with, and if you followed any of the things that Christian Sullivan's done, the guy that built the Ti Package Manager, he's built a prototype around where you can export a Photoshop file and it'll generate a titanium alloy app. So there's some stuff we've been experimenting there. Again, we don't want to do anything until we feel like we can actually be successful, at least in the 80% use cases. So we've been experimenting with that. Our internal designers have been playing around with that, trying to see, can we create a workflow? Of course, you start to get into some interesting issues there. How do I do things like reverse tripping, right? I want to be able to build something in the export it. I want to be able to write some code and then potentially be able to re-import it, change some UI. So that becomes the problem in a lot of these tools. They're one way. Right, so these are some of the things that I think make building a UI GUI builder easy for the really, really basic stuff and really, really, really hard for things that start to become a little bit more complicated. So we want to be really deliberate in that. It's not that we don't think it's necessarily important. It's just these are the things that we struggle with. On, do we go spend $5 or $6 or $10 million on something that we can only get about half right? I think a lot of people would probably rather right now us focus on a better Android or Windows 8.
We have time for one more question. Anyone? Okay.
All right, Liz. And please don't ask about Microsoft. That's just a flat rumor. I'll go ahead and put that out there. I know that's in everybody's mind. Is that Liz? Is that going to be your question?
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I have heard you mention this morning Windows 8 a couple of times.
Yep.
And BB10 is great fun. And I just wanted to know if you could please give us a status update on the plugin. My understanding is that it's a bit limited today.
On BB10 or on Windows 8?
On BB10.
Yeah.
And the dream, of course, is push the button, write once, and adapt everywhere. So when do you think that you will have a plugin that creates a real solid app for BB10 and then Windows 8?
Yeah, so BB10, as you're well aware, I think it's in preview and which should be GA in the May-June timeframe, which means a majority of the APIs that we think are critical. One of the things that we've been doing with our code processor that I mentioned earlier is we're able to analyze, we're trying to build something that can analyze the 80/20 APIs. So that's one of the advantages. So what we did in the code processor, one of the first projects we did, a number of people in the community submitted their projects who wanted to port to BB10 or wanted help in that. We actually ran the code analyzer against that to be able to determine what are the APIs that most people use. So we did that in a way to help us understand, we're not going to, prioritize something like YQL over something like table view, for example, right? So some of these are pretty obvious and some of them aren't so obvious as you'd expect. So, but we hope to be API complete in the May, which would be like the 1.0, May, June-ish timeframe, which would be the 1.0 of the Blackberry. Windows is a very similar thing, but it's a little bit further out. One of the things that's a massive effort we're going to try to do for 4.0, but we're trying to figure out how to do it, is one of the big efforts that we started, but if you can imagine, it's a significant effort, is we're trying to refactor a lot of the core engine into C++, so that we can get better reusability. We've actually, we have this algorithm called the polynomial layout engine. Blackberry, Android, and iOS all now share the same C++ layout engine. So that's the first type of thing that we're doing. We hope to eventually refactor the entire code base. The hope is one day in 4.0 or maybe a little bit beyond, you'll be able to write one module that will potentially work across multiple platforms. Of course, if you're using a platform-specific feature, you'll have to adapt that. But we're trying to take bits and pieces of the major subsystems like eventing, like layout, where you have the most likelihood of different implementations or slight variations, and we're trying to rewrite core pieces of those with a standalone unit test written in C++ so we can share them across all platforms. And so the layout engine was the first that we did with Blackberry, Windows 8, iOS, and Android. So it just, unfortunately, you can imagine this is almost 1 million lines of code between all the different things, so it's a significant effort.
Everyone, another round of applause for Jeff.